Hi, I'm Steve Clemons, and I have a couple of questions. Can the Republican Party survive President Trump? And what will that party look like if he wins again? Let's get to the bottom line. For the past 4 years, Donald Trump has been radically reshaping the Republican Party in his image and with his Trump brand. In the party's convention this week, he decided to speak every night, bucking the tradition where the candidate accepts the party's nomination on the last night, usually lots of confetti and balloons at that crescendo. He's also stuffed the keynote speeches with family members, branding the convention as a Trump event and less of a political party event. But what happens if you're a Republican, but you find his policies or his leadership or his character distasteful? Is Trump really a conservative? And under his leadership, what does the Republican Party stand for? Joining me today is someone who worked directly with President Trump. Banker and hedge fund manager Anthony Scaramucci was famously the White House communications director for 11 days in 2017. Anthony, thanks so much for joining us. You have posted an extraordinary tweet, which is rare for a Republican of your stature, and you said a vote for Joe Biden could save the Republican Party. What are you communicating at this moment? Because it sounds as if this is a desperate call for help.
Well, it is in a lot of different layers. And so attached to that tweet is a 10-minute speech that I gave last night, which is thankfully getting picked up virally, and CNN addressed it this morning. And it's three layers, really. It is the president's failed leadership style, his lack of managerial skills, his lack of what we would call executive quotient. You know, he cannot manage anything, a result of which everything is in disarray. You know, the COVID-19 crisis has been a disaster for the economy, and it's also obviously been a healthcare calamity. And then the secondary thing, as it relates to leadership, is the basis of character. Listen, I understand that we're going to tell fibs and politicians tell lies, and one of the more famous lies is from Eisenhower when he said that the U-2 plane was a weather balloon. And of course, they had Francis Gary Powers. They didn't think that he had survived the crash. And that was very embarrassing for President Eisenhower. So I understand that there are levels of mendacity in politics, but the 22,000 lies and the mischaracterization of everything that's going on in the country. And now we have media outlets and media pundits that are supporting these lies and this haze of disinformation, if you will. It is super dangerous for the Republic. Stephen, we're no longer able to debate because we can't even agree on the facts, and the president is contributing to that. And then the last piece, which I think is the scariest piece, is the demagoguery. It is almost as if Huey Long had a baby with Charles Lindbergh. That baby was raised by Roy Cohn. Roy Cohn was the nanny, and the baby is Donald Trump, and he's grown up to become the president of the United States in the early part of the 21st century of the American experiment. And it is so dangerous because what do demagogues do? They inspire people and instill fear and intimidation into the public. And what we know from our lives in middle school, the bully is able to garner some level of a faction of friendships. There will be people that sit at the lunch table with the bully that fear the bully's ire, they fear his intimidation, and so they're willing to work alongside the bully. And so we've watched this hijacking of the Republican Party. Now, Stuart Stevens is a good friend of mine. We worked together on the Romney campaign. He wrote a sensational book recently called This Is All a Lie, talking about the Faustian pact that the Republicans have had for multiple decades that have led to this sort of nonsense that Mr. Trump is now leading. And so for me, I need to speak out against it. I have had an evolution over the last 4 years. Obviously, I supported the president. I can explain what I did.
Right.
And I can also apologize for it. But I can offer up a cautionary tale to the people that listen or view your podcast. And that is when you put your ego and pride into things, your emotions go up and your intelligence goes down, and you start making very bad decisions. And I did that. And so I had the realization that something was wrong. I then got summarily fired by General Kelly after making a mistake in the White House. I've always said to people that mistake was my fault. It was certainly fireable. I've never blamed anybody for my firing. And the great irony is that General Kelly and I have developed a very close personal relationship. So I'm not the only one out here. It's General Mattis.
Right.
It's General Kelly. There's a ton
It's a
of
long
people,
list.
Stephen. Yeah, there's a
Yeah, there's a
long
long
list of
list.
people that have said, okay, enough. But I feel, I love my country. I've lived a very good part of the American dream. My dad was an aspirational, middle class, blue collar American worker. He worked at Crane 42 years. He's 85 years old today, no education. He built our family on very high
Right.
hourly wages. And I'm sitting here with you and, living a pretty nice
Yeah, but
lifestyle, frankly.
Anthony,
And I'm
you wrote a
watching the
book.
separation in our country, and it's really disturbing.
You wrote a book. I mean, you thought about President Trump at one point. You called him the blue collar president. I remember when you and I met in January of 2017. This is after President Trump had been elected, before he was inaugurated at Davos. And you told the story. You helped us all understand at Davos, thousands of people listening to your words, because you had helped put him in the White House. But at the same time, you said, look, it's going to take, he's a different kind of person that's ever been here before. And you sounded to me almost like family with him. You helped bring him to be. So I think for the purposes of looking back and understanding your evolution, what didn't you see? What didn't we see at the core? Because I think your message at that time was that in his core, he was really good, and that this was going to be good for the nation.
Well, remember, I mean, there's an expression you can never put into people what God has left out. But sometimes what we try to do is we try to idealize the people around us. And so that was one of my mistakes. But when you and I met in Davos and in Naples, Florida, prior to that, and what I wrote in the Blue Collar President, and by the way, the president did not like my book because it was very balanced. It talked about him going after the press and how he shouldn't be doing that. And the press is not the enemy of the people. But what I was trying to imply to you, what I was trying to say to the people in Davos, is that we've had a fracture in the social contract in the West. Something happened. Our political establishments, the political circularity of the elite, focused on corporate interests, or they focused on social issues, but they stopped focusing on the dilemma of blue collar families. And so what happened is globalism took power. There were a lot of advantages to globalism. I'm a big believer in David Ricardo's theory of global trade, and I am what you would classically call a free trading person. But we left out large swaths of the country. And what I was trying to say to you and the people at Davos, rightly or wrongly, the president identified that. And so I went on 71 campaign stops with him, and I was moved by it. And you're also a product of your upbringing. So when you're standing in an arena and someone's coming up to you that looks like your dad and talks like your dad and is out of work, and you're in Mexico, or New Mexico, excuse me, and the gentleman is saying, well, you're not in New Mexico. New Mexico is Mexico. We've moved 65,000 jobs since, 65,000 factories since the NAFTA deal was signed 25 to 30 years ago. And there's a sadness to this. We converted a very large group of Americans from aspirational working class families to desperational ones, Stephen. And so what I was trying to impart to you, and my best hopes and dreams for President Trump, was that he was going to be a post-partisan transformative leader that was going to break the logjam in Washington, and he was going to be less tribal and more unifying as a leader. And I got that wrong. And what I missed was his insecurity. I know that sounds strange. You're saying, well, he's insecure. How could he be insecure? He's the president of the United States, but he's actually a very insecure guy. And so he doesn't like experts. He said he was going to hire the best people. He doesn't like the best people. When he's in a room with people that he feels are smarter than him, he steamrolls them. He is smarter than generals. He is smarter than the epidemiologists. His uncle was at MIT, so therefore he's the smartest person in the room. And this sort of nonsense has turned the presidency into a one-man Broadway show. I just want to make this quick point. It's October 2019. There are two cabinet officials that have come to visit me at Skybridge. They're sitting on the couch in my office. They are former cabinet officials. And they remark, it's going to be a disaster if we have a crisis. Well, what do you guys mean? Well, listen, he can't manage. Everybody knows at Harvard Business School or the Pentagon, you can have 6 reports. The president has no reports. Every morning, it is a billiard game, the cue ball smashing into the balls, Everything's flying around. People are scared of him. They don't want to get fired. They don't want to get tweeted at. They don't want to be ashamed or humiliated by the president, like many of us have, frankly, myself included. And so what happens is the entire symphony, the entire orchestra of the executive branch has been paralyzed by the conductor. And so these two gentlemen leave and they say, look, let's pray that there's no crisis before we can get out of this thing. I thought the crisis, Stephen, was going to be the Soleimani strike in January. I turned on the TV. I said, oh, my God, this is going to be the crisis. It wasn't. But it turned out the COVID-19 situation was a crisis that they couldn't handle. He was going to lie about it. He was going to curve the truth. He wasn't going to be able to mobilize the resources necessary to solve the problem. And look at our death rates. Okay, forget about the cases. He's talking about testing and all that nonsense. Our per capita death rates are among the highest in the world, and we're one of the richest, smartest countries in the civilization, but we're being run by the wrong leader. So there's a multi-layered thing going on here that we have to speak out about and hopefully reach the people that I grew up with and said, okay, come on. I know you're angry. I understand the populism. I understand the rise of this nativism, but we're better than this as a group of people. That's been my messaging, Stephen.
So, Anthony, what do you think is happening in the country? He has still very solid support with his base. As you mentioned, we've had over 170,000 people die, but that does not seem to have dented a lot of his support. And when you look at the polling numbers of Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, people still think he's handling the economy better.
Well, I'm in touch with the resistance leaders in the Republican Party. I call the Republicans that are with the president the Vichy Republicans. Where there's a resistance group of Republicans that I'm in touch with, and we're trying to mount a resistance against the nonsense that we're seeing. But you're identifying something that is very true about the country. There's a great culture war going on in the country. There's a very large group of people. Approximately 70% of the country is white. It is still a Christian nation. And there's a culture war. And so the president is preying on those people. He is suggesting to those people, frankly, that he's the last white man standing from a darker group of people coming up over the transom and descending on their culture and destroying America. And that's what demagogues do. If you study demagoguery, they always shoot through a light through a prism that creates this hagiography of Germany long ago, an America long ago. And people cling to it, and they like it. They like the ideas around it. Secondarily, there were 15 years where even though the president has had 4 or 5 bankruptcies, and even though he's under investigation for potential financial fraud in the state of New York and the city of New York, the Apprentice show for 15 years projected him as a very wise, very competent business person. The great irony there is that he can't fire anybody. He has a conflict avoidance style to his personality. That's why he's always overcompensating with the blustering and the bullying. And so you have this impression, and that impression has been made, Stephen, not in the last 3 years, but it was made over the 15 years prior. So there's no surprise that he's scoring better than Joe Biden. I tell my Wall Street friends, well, you do know if you trace the markets back 120 years, the Democrats have a better run with the markets than the Republicans. I'm not saying that should be attributed to them necessarily or not, but there's great irony to that. But the Republicans are always going to be perceived, rightly or wrongly, to be better for business. And so I can see that. But the people in the United States know that there's something wrong right now. And the question is, are they going to accept somebody who is trying to divide their country? They have a country whose first name is United. Are they going to accept somebody that's trying to divide their country so that they can win a culture war? Or are they going to accept somebody that's more like them, which is what I think is quintessentially American, which is kinder. There's a tenderness to it. There's an empathicness to it. And that's the vice president. I don't agree with the vice president on everything. I'm a lifelong Republican. But what I do agree with the vice president on is the moral standing of his leadership and the capability set that he has to have the self-confidence to bring in a whole series of experts to help us dig out of the problems that we have. But that's why the president has his support. He's also got media outlets inside the United States that chant a rhythm of this sort of propaganda. You've got media pundits from 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock at night that are literally mental figure skaters. They're doing gymnastics and they're doing pirouettes to try to explain the president's nonsense. I said the other day that they're trying to make you believe that he's playing four-dimensional chess, but he's sitting there and he's eating the chess pieces. I mean, it's just total nonsense what is going on. So what we have to do is we have to go into certain areas of the country, which I'm going to be doing, particularly Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And they're primarily white ethnic areas, and that's what I represent. And I'm a blue-collar kid at the end of the day. I'm going to go into those areas. I'm going to explain to those people the systemic danger of President Trump. And that's why I'm doing speeches on my social media. That's why thank you for bringing me on your show. And that's why I will be, pursuant to the pandemic, of course, in those areas, explaining to these people the danger of President Trump. And I'll leave you with this thought. When has the bully won in one of our Hollywood movies? Okay, this is ridiculous that this guy is going as far as he is going. Okay, we need to reject Trumpism. We need to reject demagoguery. And we need to restore the confidence of blue-collar Americans that they can have an aspirational opportunity in our country. And there's been malpractice on both sides. We have to figure that out. We have to focus on policies that are not necessarily left or right, but policies that are right or wrong for those people. And then the anger will die down and people will get renewed. There'll be a social contract renewal, Stephen, if we can pursue that.
Right. You know, how does somebody go through that process of leaving the safety of being inside the Trump tent to taking the risk of now challenging it?
I just made a decision. It was after the squad, frankly, after he went after the squad last year. I said, okay, this is enough. I'm not going to disavow my personal history, my personal integrity, what they did to my family when they arrived in America. They told my grandmother to go back to the country she originally came from. This is a racist nativist trope that's classically disgusting in America. And my grandmother produced three children. One was my mom. Two sons served in World War II. My uncle Anthony, who I'm named after, was wounded at Normandy Beach. He's got the Purple Heart from the United States. Should my grandmother have gone back to the country that she originally came from? And so that was a bridge too far for me. I denounced it. The president went to attack me, no problem, because that's what demagogues do. You can't be 7 to 8 for a demagogue. You got to be 13 for 10. So I'm a New Yorker. If he's attacking me, you think I'm like these guys in the Congress? I went right after him. And then he did what he classically does. He started attacking my wife. I mean, who does that? Who does that? Okay. And let me tell you something. You and I know each other a little bit. Do I look like Ted Cruz to you? Do I act like Ted Cruz? I mean, are you kidding me? You're not going after my wife or my family members. They don't even do that in the mob. Okay. So I said, that's it. And I took the gloves off and I'm ready. And I think we can punch him through the ropes. I think he is universally disliked. He's arguably one of the most hated people in our civilization globally. And I think at the end of the day, he's universally disliked. We just have to convince that 40-ish% of the people, wait a minute, you're going to be able to live your life. There's really not that big of a culture war. Under a Joe Biden presidency, you're going to be okay. Trump, the president, is talking about riots and all this other stuff. It's happening under his regime. If anything, we may be able to dial this down under a Biden administration. If anything, we may be able to have more cooperation between the social services and the social organizations and the police force in these cities and see if we can reduce violence and increase racial awareness. So to me, that's where I am. But you said something that I just want to point out. I get death threats every day. I get nasty letters mailed to my house. I've had people take pictures of the front door of my house and say they're coming in to hurt me and my family. I've had squad cars from the Nassau County Police stationed outside of my house because some of those threats were frankly legitimate. And I think that's what people don't like, but that's Trump's America. Okay, but I love the country and I want to live in a free country and I want to live in a country where people like me and you can express ourselves because I think that is the beauty of the country. That's why Lincoln said it was the last best hope for mankind. And so I have a feeling about myself where, you know, I fought my way from my blue collar background to where I am today. I'm not going to give up the fight now, and I'm not going to live my life in fear. I don't know what these other guys are doing, but I got to tell you right now, Stephen, they are going to be ashamed of themselves in 3, 5, 10 years. They're going to shake their heads and say, why did I do that? The same way I'm ashamed of myself, frankly, that I supported President Trump after I realized how crazy he actually was.
Right. Anthony, you once thought that there might be a chance that Donald Trump might not run. It looks like we're past that point now. But if he runs and he loses by the electoral college, the state certified number of votes past 270. Do you think he will leave?
I do think he will leave. I think at the end of the day, he's a coward. I mean, just to look at the way he operates on Twitter, I have to also tell you that if you want to transform a democracy into an autocracy, you better have some friends in the American military. Okay, these people despise him. Okay, this is not just the active service people like General Milley, even Secretary Esper can't stand the guy, but they're sitting there trying to stomach the whole situation. But look at all the retired military that can't stand him. Look at what General Mattis, a brave patriot, has written about him. And so, they're going to scrape him out of there if they have to. There's already been conversations, as you know, well documented, between the Secret Service and the Marines about who's going to remove him if he tries to contest the election. And so I think that is a horrible situation. I want you to imagine America, the peaceful transfer of power through the Civil War, 244 years, two global wars. We have a lunatic in the White House where the Secret Service and the Marines have to have a contemplated strategy of what they're going to do to remove him from office. That enough should be the litmus test for the American people to say, okay, wait. This is not the right guy for us. We are so much better than this. We can do so much better than this man. And so, yes, I do think he's leaving. He will have to leave summarily and immediately. But listen, that's his personality. It's going to be a fight to the end. But I predict this will be a lot like Reagan and Carter. It'll look very, very close to the end. And then that proverbial question will come up. Am I better off? Am I better off than 4 years ago? And the answer is obviously no. There's 31 million people unemployed. He's destroyed the economy. There will be 250,000 Americans dead from the COVID-19 crisis. He's wiped out. He's in his. He's going to start his 6th Vietnam death cycle. If you look at it from that perspective, okay. And so to me, Stephen, he's going, and by the end of this thing, I think it'll be a landslide for the vice president. I really believe that. And I was pushing back last night on Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon because the Liz pendants against the president, once this nonsense of propaganda ends at the Republican convention, is overwhelming. And he's also done something that has been totally miscalculated by his team. He's broken off a very large group of Republicans, including me. And I'll finish with this one sentence. Steve Bannon said it better than anybody. Hive off 3 to 5% of the Republicans. It's over. And that's exactly what he's done. And we will be executing a plan. The Lincoln Project, myself, Republicans for Joe Biden, the Foundation for Core Principles, Evan McMullen's team. We're all working together to defeat this man.
Well, let me just ask you finally, Anthony, if your vision comes about, I know you spoke at the foundation on or the Convention on Founding Principles. Are you there to be an architect of a revived, restored Party of Lincoln, restoring a healthy Republican Party?
I would like to be. Listen, I would put myself forward and volunteer that. I don't. As you get older, you realize your level of insignificance in life. And so I'm not trying to overstate my self-importance, but I would certainly like to be at the table because I have a wonderful love for the country. And I know that the country needs healing. I know the country needs a Republican Party that has principles and values, but it's also capable of working with the Democrats. At the end of the day, that's what our founders wanted. They wanted a consensus. They wanted us to sit at the table and say, okay, I'm going to give this up that's important to me, but you have to give that up that's important to you. They didn't want this level of polarity and this extremist and this radicalism. And so we have to figure out a way to heal that. And certainly I would like to be a part of that. But I also want to be a business person. You pointed out my business. Sure, I've taken hits in my business, but as I tell people, I don't care. Okay, at the end of the day, I'm going to speak what I think is true because I love the country. And so it's patriotism, commercialism, and then partisanship. Okay, and the commercialism and the partisanship are way down on the list, way, way below the patriotism.
Well, with that, Anthony Scaramucci, thank you so much for sharing your insights. We're going to see how this all plays out. Really appreciate your spending time with us and sharing thoughts on really these important political tectonics in the United States. Thank you.
Well, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me, Steve.
So what's the bottom line? Is history repeating itself? Donald Trump is facing similar challenges from the right and the left as he did in 2016. Back then, he was 9 points behind Hillary Clinton. Today, he's 9 points behind Joe Biden. A lot of Americans were angry then. They felt betrayed after the financial crisis and after endless wars. Trump won because his base actually wanted somebody to strangle Washington, D.C. But my guest today, after watching Trump in action, watching him mismanage a pandemic, stoke flames of racial division, propagate conspiracy theories, believes Donald Trump cares only about his own power and not the welfare of all Americans. In just a few weeks, the people of America are going to decide if this is the kind of country they want. And that's the bottom line.